What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is Monday, January 13th, last day to vote at sportspodcastgroup.com. We welcome you to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas, and we are recapping the first 5 games of Wild Card Weekend with still one more to come tonight, and that would be Minnesota at the Rams in Arizona at 8 p.m. Eastern. Adam Mazur, Dave Richard, and Jamey Eisenberg. What'd you guys think of Wild Card Weekend? Pretty terrible as usual, right?
Oh, I mean, it ended nicely, but for the most part, not. I'm reminded that the seeds that are usually 5, 6, and 7 are closer to 500 level teams and not Super Bowl contenders. That was the takeaway.
Yeah, or the seeds. I mean, it's kind of interesting to say the seeds because the seeds sometimes aren't the better teams, which I guess the NFL, we're just realizing we need to fix this problem. You should not be given a home game if your record is worse than the wild card team. It just shouldn't. It's ridiculous. Fix
Well,
this.
I think we would have said that about the Chargers and the Texans, right? Going in.
It's fine. But if you finish with a better record than the wild card team, you should be at home. Why should
right? But you understand why they do it the way that they do it.
Look, if you win your division, you should get in the playoffs, but you shouldn't necessarily get a home game. I got to earn the home game.
I don't know, man. It guarantees at least one team from every division a home playoff game. And that's a moneymaker for the owners of the teams. So I think it's a selling point to the owners that one of you from each division will get a home playoff game. You'll make some extra bread because that's what really we care about here. But they care about that. That's why they have it in there.
Well, I mean, everybody's benefiting if they get a home game, whether it's the division winner or the non-division winner.
I know, but it guarantees that one team from every single division gets one. That's the point.
I thought about this math because I knew Dave was going to bring that point up because that is the sticking point, I think, for the owners. And it does give you an easier path to hosting a division game. But there is also a scenario. I'm sorry, a playoff game, yeah. Right. But there's also a scenario where in the other scenario where they do it the way I want them to do it and reward the better seed, the better record with the higher seed in the playoff, in the home game, is that you don't have to win your division to get a home game, that you just have to be really good.
All right. Yeah. Well, and if that's going to change, who's going to change that will be the owners. And if they're ready to give up that guarantee that 1 out of every 4 will have a home playoff game, then it'll change and the games will be more interesting. And then you reward the teams that are better. But yeah. I don't know if they're going to do that, Adam.
I hope they do. Dave, Jamey, let's get a fantasy winner and a fantasy loser from Wild Card Weekend. Jamey, why don't you start with a winner?
Winner is James Cook. Just another strong performance from him. And, I'm just looking at our mock draft and and our running back rankings. And it feels like he just continues to get somewhat overlooked a little bit for the season that he had and hopefully will continue to have. So, this was a guy that we were debating. Should he be a second round pick in 2024? Curious to see where he'll end up being in 2025. I think he'll be a round 2 pick again. But just, one of these guys that if you miss on the top tier running backs, you feel pretty good about if you go wide receiver, running back to start your draft.
16.7 PPR points per game. Always a good thing when you're north of 15 PPR points. And potentially could be better next year than he was this year. And that's saying something because he was really good.
He did not have a target, James Cook, in this game against Denver. And he only had 32 catches.
That's the beauty.
2 catches per game. Yeah, I know. But you look at a guy and say, 2 catches per game. Scored a bunch of touchdowns. Does he regress there? I think the bottom line is he's really, really good. And he's
I think when you look at, and again, you got to factor in age, but when you start to get to that group of guys of Derrick Henry, Kyron Williams, James Cook, the guys that aren't going to be significant pass catchers based on their track record. When I say significant, like 40 plus, 50 plus catch guys, they're still really solid players and they're in good offenses. Again, hopefully Henry holds up and can still do this when he's 31 going on 32. But in the case of James Cook, he's in his prime and he's, attached to such a great offense. Hopefully, as Josh Allen alluded to, they leave Joe Brady alone and he stays in Buffalo and they keep this offensive system and everything in place and just continue to build on it. So that'd be fun to see.
And James Cook only 1 fewer catch than Saquon Barkley, and Saquon Barkley is the number 1 running back per game this year in PPR. And Saquon Barkley sliding instead of going for a ridiculously long, awesome touchdown run at the end of the Packers game. All right, Dave, who's your fantasy winner?
I think we're also overlooking Terry McLaurin, who didn't even have as many PPR points per game as James Cook, but someone who stepped up and was the absolute alpha for Jaden Daniels against Tampa Bay, and it's Tampa Bay. And Jamey, you might accuse me of saying, "Well, you're overvaluing somebody who played against the Bucks," but he's
No,
good all year. He was a monster in Week 18. Now he was a monster in the first playoff game. He gets Detroit next. I'm sure he's going to be a monster in that game. And I wonder if he's going to be an overlooked guy. How many top 12s was he in, Jamey?
he was in none, but this is going to be an interesting, player to dissect in the offseason because they're going to add another receiver. And it's a matter of, is that another significant addition or is it another, Noah Brown, Diami Brown, kind of a Darnell Mooney type, somebody who is
Right.
a good player, but not a superstar. Because if they're in the T. Higgins market, if they're in the, market of trying to, the draft market of going and getting somebody early to add another piece, because they should, they were in the, some of the offseason discussions about some of these wide receivers as well. He's still going to be the number one guy unless it's just a superstar addition. But I think there's the chance of, him losing some value based on what could happen this offseason. But you're right. I mean, he was awesome all season. I did like the fact that nearly caught a touchdown on the right side. So Cliff Kingsbury in the playoff moving around a little bit as opposed to just leaving on the left the entire time. Had that ball, in the end zone against Tampa Bay that was broken up. But in any event, yeah, I mean, what an absolute game. Now, just for the purpose of the show, I'm writing winners and losers for the site, and he's definitely on the winner side. So there'll be winners and losers from the first round of the playoffs on CBSSports.com. So yeah, was fun to watch, and hopefully we continue just to see him build off of this, because when you see what you see what he can be when he has a quarterback. He was in that group of guys of Stephon Diggs when he was in Minnesota. Great player, but never maximizing his fantasy potential. DJ Moore in Carolina, great player, maybe never maximizing his fantasy potential. Terry McLaurin's kind of been that guy, in Washington, in that same group of players. And now you're seeing what he can be when he has a great quarterback. And it's just,
right. That's the thing. We're seeing it now. We didn't see it before this year. Yeah. I believe this is the best year he's ever had.
Oh, by far.
Sure.
Yeah. So I don't think he's averaged north of 15 PPR points before in his career. And you're right. Short for them bringing in a big time receiver. Here are the receivers that they could add. T. Higgins obviously would be amazing. Godwin's a free agent. Stephon Diggs is a free agent. Those guys wouldn't scare me off of McLaurin.
Godwin would. Godwin
Maybe.
would scare me.
Nah, maybe. I don't know if they'd use him the same way that the Bucks would. Devontae Adams could be a cap casualty. Do they make a move to sign him? Everybody else that's on this list, like Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, no. I think McLaurin will be the number one guy there. I feel good about that.
Terry McLaurin was the number 7 wide receiver overall in full PPR. He was 16th per game, pardon me. But so like I said, wide receiver 7. Since the NFL moved to a 17-game schedule, this is 4 seasons now, Terry McLaurin is tied for the fewest targets for any top 8 wide receiver overall in PPR. Not per game, but overall. Jalen Waddle also had 117 targets a couple of years ago and finished as a top 8 guy, but that's kind of the issue here is you do have a low volume passing offense and only 117 targets for Terry McLaurin. That's pretty rare to have the season he had with that target.
I don't think we'll see a huge spike in targets, but this is also a rookie quarterback that hopefully will improve, and we've talked about this when talking about the quarterback rankings, the rookie season of CJ Stroud and the rookie season of Baker Mayfield and how those guys, somewhat regressed. So hopefully that's not the case with Jaden Daniels, but I think he will continue to improve as a passer, and that could hopefully help McLaurin and whoever else they bring in.
All right. How about some fantasy losers? Jamey, who's a loser?
There's a lot. I'll start with J.K. Dobbins. This is going to be an interesting offseason because what do they do? I think what the blueprint of what this offense wants to be. And, they had it at times this season when Dobbins was healthy, but coming off this game, where they just got completely shellacked by the Texans and their defense, especially after how the game started. I don't know if, they feel comfortable with Dobbins, who missed 4 games, with the knee injury and his injury track record. So, if you were in the Dobbins camp, I certainly am, you wanted to see not only just a good game against the Texans, but maybe a playoff run to see how he looked in the postseason and maybe solidify himself as the guy there for the Chargers. So not the best day for this offense. Clearly, obviously Herbert's a loser with the interceptions, but the run game did not support the passing game at all, and really hasn't for a few weeks. And granted that was a lot due to the injury, but even the 2 games back for Dobbins wasn't over the top fantastic. So not the way I'm sure he wanted to go into free agency.
And Dave, a fantasy loser for you from Wildcard Weekend?
I got a fake out one, and then I got a real one. Derrick Henry's at 351 carries on the year. He's going to get to 370, barring something unforeseen against Buffalo. And if the Ravens win that game, he'll get to 400. And so I wonder if that's something that'll creep into your mind. He's going to play into late January, 31 years old, 400 touches. Not something that we feel great about when it comes to evaluating players the following season. But the real one is anybody in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. Pickens, for the receivers there, we don't know. You want to talk about a team that needs to upgrade at wide receiver. That's one that definitely needs to do it. And we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. Could it be any worse than what they've got this year? Probably not. But Russell Wilson, as good of a game that he had, I don't think he did anything to earn a long-term contract extension in Pittsburgh. Najee Harris is about to be a free agent. Physically, he's the type of guy that the Chargers might want to replace J.K. Dobbins with. But he's got a terrible rushing average, or at least he did in this game, and he really hasn't met the expectation of being a first-round draft pick in the NFL, and just the Steelers completely had to get away from him in their playoff game. So Najee's a loser. Russell Wilson, I don't know where he plays next year, if it's Pittsburgh or anywhere else. Pickens, just because he's not a complete guy on and off the field. His comments after the playoff game were pretty entertaining about, he talked about whether or not he's got optimism for the future, and he said no. That was weird. The whole Steelers squad, I feel like they're all fantasy losers, and no one's going to want to touch these guys next year.
It was such a strange answer to that question. I almost feel like he didn't hear the question correctly. I mean,
maybe.
No, because they were like, hey, have you seen progress from the offense since you've been here? He's like, oh yeah, I've seen a lot of progress. Year 1, year 2. But yeah, we definitely made some progress. Does that give you optimism going forward? No. It was just so weird. I
think he was just being honest.
Very possible, but the way he said, I don't know. If you listen to I encourage everyone to watch the interview because it was just so strange how
watch the whole thing. The whole thing.
Nonchalantly, he said that.
Yeah.
All right. I do have a lot to ask you about and say about George Pickens, including his terrible touchdown luck. I'll just tell you right now, George Pickens, he had 7 green zone targets. He did not catch a single one of them. He is the only player with 6 or more green zone targets and 0 catches. He's the only wide receiver with 6 or more green zone targets and 0 touchdowns. He also had 12 end zone targets and only 2 touchdowns. 15 most end zone targets among wide receivers, but among 20 wide receivers with 11 or more end zone targets, George Pickens had the fewest touchdowns on his end zone targets. So he was weird. He was like, you can kind of maybe throw out the Justin Fields game, and he gave us games. He gave us a glimpse of what he could be with Russell Wilson, but then he finished very poorly. So I'll ask.
I think you just got a question: Is he a 1 for the Steelers?
Right?
Is he
sure.
more of a 2? And I think, you got to figure out, what they do to add to it. We know that they were somewhat aggressive in the offseason. They were in the Brandon Ayuk conversation. They ended up, only getting Mike Williams at the trade deadline. There were some other guys that were discussed. But, this is a team that I would guess that just based on the quarterback market, like, does bringing back Russell Wilson make more sense than, let's say, signing a Kirk Cousins? I would say yes, because I think Russell Wilson did some good things for them. Does bringing back Russell Wilson and Justin Fields make some sense? If I'm the Steelers, I'm trying to draft somebody and develop and, let Russell Wilson sort of play it out. That their defense will keep them in games. They'll have a chance to be a playoff team. That's just kind of what they are. But until they find that long-term answer, they're going to just continue being this, sort of purgatory stage of Mike Tomlin gets them to the playoffs. They're just very well coached. This 5-game losing streak to end the season was unfortunate. A lot of it had to do with what the early season schedule was versus the late season schedule. You just have some of the opponents that they faced, but they're behind 2 other teams in their division, and Cleveland can easily catch them if things improve quickly there. So they just got to address that spot. But I don't know if there's anybody out there just based on where they're selecting and even the quarterbacks that are available that there's an upgrade over Russell Wilson. So, you never know what the season would have looked like had he played the entire year.
Would Aaron Rodgers at a cheap contract be an upgrade over Russell Wilson?
No,
if you're paying Russ $25+ million.
No, if the contracts are the same, I'd rather just stick with Russell Wilson.
I would agree, but it wouldn't be, because if Rodgers gets released from the Jets and he wants to play somewhere, he's in the exact same boat that Kirk Cousins is going to be in, that Russell Wilson was just in. He doesn't care what the new contract is because he's getting paid a ton from his old team.
Yeah, I would assume the Steelers stick with Russell Wilson, who at least gives them a little bit of mobility as opposed to what
Rodgers.
Plus, you also got to see if Arthur Smith stays.
Yeah, look, we thought George Pickens would have a boost because his passing game would get better. It did in one category. That was touchdowns. The last 2 years, 12 touchdowns, 13 touchdowns. This year, 21 touchdown passes. But in terms of yards, it was basically the same. You know, it was a little bit better than last year, but it was actually, they threw for fewer yards than they did in 2022 in his rookie year. They have now been in gross passing yards per game, 24th, 27th, and 26th in 3 seasons with, we enjoyed the George Pickens era. And the other problem is we got to go to break, but like he needs to be, is he a 1? I don't know. Probably not, but there's some encouraging things, right? We can get into it.
Yeah.
But is he a 2? If he is a 2, if they get someone and make him the number 2 receiver, how is he going to be a fantasy standout, right? They're just not going to be able to support 2 guys.
In the current environment, no. He's a 2 on an elite passing offense. Like in this offense, you know, who are they going to get that's going to be better than him right now without upgrading the quarterback? You know, so it's got to be hand in hand to sort of make it all work. I think for fantasy, you're talking about a very good low-end number 2 receiver, high-end number 3 receiver that could easily be a top 15 guy. I mean, you see the flashes of it, you know. So
yeah, for sure.
He's going to be one of my favorite draft picks next year, you know, because I think he'll fall in an appropriate spot. That, you know, that second wave of wide receivers that we usually see in round 4, round 5, like he's going to be perfect right there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Reminds me a little bit of Terry McLaurin, just with the touchdowns. I have not been there.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break. Before we do that, though, it's a great time to sign up for BetMGM. If you have not done that yet, use the bonus code FANTASY, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Just download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. We'll take a break, and when we come back, I will tell you if I had one football wish, what would it be? Tell you after this. On today's show, we're going to do one question for each eliminated team. My Steelers question was about George Pickens, so we can probably cross that one off. But if I had one football wish, guys, it would be to somehow make it so that the Chiefs, Bills, and Ravens could all play each other at the same time on the same field. Because, oh, man, I'm sorry, the Texans are going to get destroyed this week. But the other 3 teams next week, the other 3 teams are just so damn good. I like the Ravens to go into Buffalo and win. I think they're going to win the Super Bowl. But last week I said, the Chiefs forget it. The Chiefs don't have to be the best team. They're just going to win the Super Bowl. That's just how it works. But if the best team were going to win the Super Bowl, it would be the Ravens. But guys, I am in love with the AFC top 3. It's awesome. It's just going to be a heavyweight slugfest from here on out.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. Yeah.
How you guys feeling?
We're excited for it.
Yeah. How you feeling about this matchup? It's Jackson.
I have not really. I'm more focused on just like being excited to watch the game than pick the game. It'll come later in the week, obviously, but for now, like just the idea that the top 2 MVP candidates facing off and 2 good defenses. Buffalo's defense really bounced back yesterday, whenever it was.
Yeah, it's going to be a much tougher test.
I mean, but look, all the defenses remaining either played well this past weekend. Give the Texans some credit. My God, that was amazing.
They were great.
And the Chiefs defense we know has been great all season. It's going to be interesting to see how these 2 teams, you know, handle each other in Baltimore and Buffalo, and the 2 quarterbacks, you know, just they feel like they're unstoppable right now. It's you hope that this is not the AFC Championship game. The nice thing is that if the Chiefs win, that we still get another one of these.
Yes.
You know, big time performances.
Right. But Chiefs haters are already saying, oh man, they've got an easy game. Then it's not like Buffalo and Baltimore where they have to play each other and then play Kansas City. So
they got the one seed for a
how
reason.
people are complaining about it. It's mostly Bills fans and Ravens fans. Their path is much harder than the Chiefs' path.
Are they an anti-hero? Because I was thinking about that Taylor Swift song and the Chiefs tie-in, and I was listening to it this morning and said, it must be exhausting always rooting for the anti-hero. It's like, is that just about the Chiefs? But anyway, so I'm excited for that. And the Eagles are also amazing. They are the best team in the NFC. But A.J. Brown is playing through a knee injury, and that is a bit of an issue here. So we'll go through the injuries, news, and notes here. So A.J. Brown with a really bad game. First of all, Jalen Hurts only threw 21 passes for 131 yards, but A.J. Brown had 1 catch on 10 targets. He had as many catches as books read during this game. So he was reading a book on the sideline. Nakobe Dean, their linebacker, this is a big injury. He left with a knee injury. It could be a significant one.
It appears to be, yeah.
Yeah. So that does definitely weaken them a little bit. But they're going to play Washington next. No, they're going to play the loser.
Winner of Monday's game.
The winner of tonight's game, yeah. Washington will be at Detroit next week. Jaden Reed left with a shoulder injury. Romeo Dobbs, a concussion. It was by the end of the game, Jordan Love without his top 3 receivers because Watson was out, and on his third left guard. Tough scenario for that. And it's still a winnable game for the Packers. They missed so many opportunities. Washington defensive tackle Daron Payne left with a finger injury. How about this? C.J. Stroud became the 3rd quarterback since 1991 to throw for 101 or more yards on a possession in a postseason game. So they had that drive that started at the 1 yard line. He threw for over 100 yards on that drive because they had some penalty yards. So good for him. The Patriots hired Mike Vrabel, Dave. They could hire Josh McDaniels as their offensive coordinator. What are you thinking here about the Patriots?
They're just bringing back all their old faces. Look, I think Vrabel's a good coach, and whether or not he can lead Drake May and company to a Super Bowl, let's say 1 Super Bowl instead of 6, like what we saw before in New England, that remains to be seen. But he's a tough coach, but a guy who can make his team strong and competitive. It's exactly what the Patriots want. It's what every team wants. And so good move by the Patriots to bring him back home. I don't know if I love Josh McDaniels coming back to be the OC, but we'll see what happens.
And Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles again. Unbelievable. So he will probably miss most, if not all, of next season. What thoughts, Jamey?
It's probably good for the Browns, because now you don't have to deal with an injured quarterback coming back and trying to see what it looks like at the middle of the season. So you hope you go through the 2025 campaign with whatever they do there, which most likely is going to be a rookie. We may have seen the last snap for Deshaun Watson as a member of the Browns.
All right, and Atlanta fired defensive coordinator Jimmy Lake and defensive line coach Jay Rodgers. I want to thank everyone if you voted for us at Sports Podcast Group. We'll find out the results in a little bit, but sportspodcastgroup.com today, Monday, is the last day to vote. Please make it happen. Go to Sports Podcast Group, click on Vote Now, best fantasy betting and gaming category, and just vote for fantasy football today, not fantasy baseball. You could vote for fantasy baseball today if you want, but fantasy football today, you got to scroll down a little bit and click the thumbs up there, and then you just have to give your email address, and it takes about 30 seconds at sportspodcastgroup.com. And that's it for the news and notes. So we get to one question for each eliminated team. For the Chargers, Ladd McConkey with a huge game and a really impressive 86-yard touchdown. 9 catches, 197 yards, and a touchdown on 14 targets. Oh, you want to do something fun here? Let's see if you guys can guess. Who was the number 1 quarterback of Wild Card Weekend through Sunday's games?
Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson? Josh Allen.
Yeah, I would say Allen.
Yeah, Josh Allen by 1 point over Lamar Jackson. Who was the number 1 running back?
There were some good ones. Henry?
Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
30 fantasy points, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns.
So long ago when he had that big game.
Who was the number 1 wide receiver?
McConkey,
34. I think McConkey outscored everyone. Yeah, he outscored Josh Allen. Who was the number 1 tight end?
Goddard.
The only one to score. Dallas Goedert. How about that? Terrible week for tight ends so far. All right. So is Ladd McConkey a top 12 wide receiver in 2025?
He's right there. I could give you the people who put him in the top 12 if you want from the story that's on the site. It's going to be interesting to see. This is another team that's going to add a pass catcher, whether it's a tight end or another receiver. So, what does that mean for McConkey? But my gosh, like I went back and looked, and it's funny that Buffalo, with what their receiving core looks like, they had an opportunity to draft McConkey, traded the pick to the Chiefs. Chiefs take Xavier Worthy. They then take Keon Coleman at the start of the second round, and McConkey goes right behind them. Imagine that weapon with Josh Allen. Like, and the reason I bring it up is because Buffalo had multiple chances to take him. The Chiefs could have drafted him. Not that Xavier Worthy's not a good player or not, but like, my goodness, and the 49ers, taking Ricky Pearsall, the Panthers taking Xavier Legette in the last pick of the first round. Like, not many teams obviously passed on him, but he's legit, man. He's not just a slot receiver as we've seen. He could play, inside and outside. And, you hope that the Chargers offense evolves a little bit. Hard to expect that with Greg Roman. That's just not his history, but there's certainly enough targets and opportunities. And depending on what the run game looks like, Ladd McConkey is going to be, if not a top 12 receiver for a lot of people, right on the cusp.
Yeah, I put him in at 11. And I agree. Like, he's in that same boat as Terry McLaurin, where the Chargers could add another. They got to add somebody who can take the top off. And then McConkey can benefit from that by winning underneath and then making plays after the catch, just like we've seen, really not just in wildcard weekend, but the last 6 weeks of the regular season. He averaged 19 PPR points per game, averaged 15.1 over the course of the year. I'll tell you the one thing, and this is something that I remember hearing at the Senior Bowl. He was at the Senior Bowl last year. The one thing that warded off teams a little bit is that he's small, he's lean. And so if you can just accept that fact that, all right, he might be a little leaner than other wide receivers across the league, man, he's amazing. Just a precise route runner, great hands, good speed, everything that you pretty much look for otherwise in a wideout. So
3 of the 6 of us, and again, you can read all of our top 12 receivers for 2025. The early rankings are on CBSSports.com. The 3 of us ranked 12 receivers, Heath, Jacob, Gibbs, and Dan Schneier. 3 of us had McConkey in the top 12. 3 did not. Can you guess, Adam, who the 3 were and who the 3 weren't?
I did not. Dave did.
One who was in and one who was out. Dave said his was in. Yours is out.
Mm-hmm. Jacob Gibbs absolutely did. He's a huge McConkey guy. And because Dan is so easily influenced by Jacob, I'm going to say Dan did. So I'm going to say Dave, Dan, and Jacob had him in. Me, you, and Heath had him out.
All right, you're horrible at this. Me, Dave, and Heath had him in. You, Jacob, and Dan had him out. Wow. So Dave had him the highest at 11. Heath and I have him at 12. Not ranked for you, Jacob, or Dan. I'll just confirm that in case I did it quickly.
It's funny because Dan usually goes for the prospects as well. And McConkey was unquestionably one of the better prospects at receiver last year.
So I'm not saying the wrong thing here. So
you want another quick stat on McConkey while Jamey looks?
I got a lot here to talk about because
Dan, no, and Jacob, no, but he did. No, that wasn't the player that was left out either for them.
This is yet another year when Ladd McConkey, by the way, Ladd McConkey finished as wide receiver 13 in PPR, but he was like a half a point behind Devontae Adams, almost finished top 12. Another year where, unless you want to count McConkey, but he technically is 13, we did not have a team that was bottom 5 in pass attempts give us a top 12 wide receiver in PPR. So that's the thing about McConkey. He was awesome, but he was only on pace for 119 targets. That's really just not enough. He had an incredible explosive play rate. He was one of the best playmakers at the position, which is weird for a guy with a 66% slot rate, but there just aren't enough targets. So that's the thing. Like, can the Chargers change their philosophy? They kind of did. I think they became more pass heavy. They realized, Herbert's our best player, but if they're going to be bottom 5 in pass attempts, they were fifth fewest pass attempts. He's probably not going to be a top 12 wide receiver. His stats remind me a little bit of Brandon Ayuk. 87 catches, 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns on 119 targets. That's his 17-game pace because McConkey missed the game. Now, if you want to go with his 17-game pace in his last 10, That's 99 catches, 1,500 yards, 8 touchdowns on 124 targets. That's too good for 124 targets. I don't think he can be as efficient as he was. They need to throw the ball a little bit more. So that's my issue with McConkey. And by the way, he'd probably be like 14th for me. So, just outside the top 12.
It's going to be very surprising to see him not be a round 2 pick right now.
You'll get a popular round 3 pick if he falls that far.
Yeah.
Top 30 for sure, I'd say.
Yeah.
All right.
And all of our top 25 picks will be on the site by the end of the day.
My next question was, do we still buy a George Pickens breakout? But I'm going to skip that one because we already talked about George Pickens. Are you sold on Baker Mayfield? That is my next question. Baker Mayfield with a strange night last night. Only 18 pass attempts. They had the ball for 24 minutes and 34 seconds. How many plays? 44 plays for the Bucs, 69 for the Commanders. An amazing win for Washington, 23-20. Are you sold on Baker Mayfield, Dave? That's my question about the Bucs.
I definitely was before the game against the Commanders, and I still probably will be. He finished the regular season with at least 25 fantasy points in each game, far and away his best year as a pro. I don't expect him to be as good next year. And I think when I initially ranked him, I put him too high, but he'll be a top 12 quarterback. He'll be somebody that you'll love the value of once you get to at least the mid rounds, which is where he's going to go. I mean, I'm curious to see what this receiving core does look like next year. I don't know if Godwin stays. Evans will be there. You can make the argument, well, he'll be another year older. Man, just look at how he played against Washington. Like he's still that dude. And I'm hoping McMillan can take a step. Maybe they add another pass catcher. They certainly should. And I think he's got a good offensive line. There's a lot that's still going to be in place that I'll be happy about with Baker Mayfield. So it comes down to whether or not he's going to be a value on draft day. I think he will be. And that's something that I would like to have so I can build up other positions before I take a quarterback in, let's call it round 6+.
Jamey, are you sold on Baker Mayfield, who was the number 3 quarterback per game in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues, number 4 in 4-point?
100%. Yeah, this game did not change my opinion of Baker Mayfield at all. I think the receiving core conversation is definitely interesting because I would love to see Chris Godwin back for Baker. I would not like to see it for McMillan and the breakout potential there. But look, Mike Evans missed 4 games. Chris Godwin got hurt. McMillan didn't come on until the end, and Baker still managed to get his way through 20-point games during that stretch, mostly with Kate Otten. But I think what we saw is he started to run a little bit more. The big concern for me would be is if Liam Cohen leaves. So if there's a change there, then I would not love the situation, barring whoever they bring in, because I think we thought, oh wow, Dave Canales left, Baker was so good with Canales. Well, he was better with Liam Cohen. So they could certainly bring in somebody else who's on the same level, if not better. Really, the only concern is, does this run game continue to improve? And you brought this up a few times during the season, Adam, that when Bucky Irving and Rashad White and Sean Tucker had that little stretch of, and a lot of it had to do with the receiving core, that Baker's numbers weren't as extravagant.
Yeah.
This was kind of the evolution of the offense. And, you saw it a little bit in this playoff game, and that, 18 pass attempts versus 25 carries for the back, or no, I shouldn't say that. 18 carries versus 18 carries for the backfield, because Baker had 7 rush attempts. But, you're talking about Bucky Irvin's really good. And this run game looks like under Liam Cohen is going to be really good, by comparison to what it was 2 years ago when we were saying Rashad White's just not a good running back. Well, maybe it just was the system. In any event, that's a little bit more of a concern for me. So Baker is still QB6 for me. I'm not moving him in my rankings as of now. Again, we'll see what this receiving core looks like because, yes, while Mike Evans is still really good, he also is going to be really old. And that's not something I want to hang my hat on, is that he's going to still be able to support what Baker needs. I think he still needs another player there. So if Godwin's back, I'll love it.
Do you want the splits, Adam, for Baker over the course of the year?
Mm-hmm.
And these, again, fantasy point averages, 6 point per game, 28.3 with Godwin and Evans. That was for 7 games. And then there were 3 games where he didn't have Godwin or Evans. He averaged 20.4. So still getting over 20 without his top 2 wide receivers. I think that's a big plus. And that's a credit to both Baker and Liam Cohen. And then let's see, weeks 12 through 18, Evans is there. No Godwin. He averaged 26.9 in those games. However, 31.5 in games with McMillan's breakout and Evans. That's the final 5 games of the year. So which Baker are we getting next year? That's the question that we're going to have to get answered. And if it's the guy that we saw at the end of this year, getting him in round 6 as the 6th quarterback off the board will be the biggest steal on draft day. If it's the guy that didn't put up great numbers when Godwin and Evans are out, and that would be possible if Evans takes a big step back and they don't replace and Godwin at all. Godwin leaves, McMillan doesn't step up. Yeah, then he's going to be a bust.
Mm-hmm. I would say, the question was, are you sold on Baker Mayfield? I would say that, I could say I am, but I also think he had a really lucky season. His touchdown rate was really high. His rushing yards, 378 rushing yards, that kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, his yards per carry, like last year and this year, I just want to compare the 17 game paces. Just the rushing totals. If I know I have this somewhere. You know what? I lost it in my notes, but it's something like he had about the same amount of carries per game, but he averaged like 6.3 yards per carry this year and 2.6 yards per carry last year. So the rushing totals could come way down. And then there's also this. He had 13 fumbles in the regular season, and he lost 2 of them. And he led the NFL in interceptions thrown. And he only had 3 completions all year of 30 or more air yards, and 2 of them were in week 18. So I think he had a very lucky season. But at the same time, he also averaged about 24 points per game in the last 7 games of 2023. So he carried over some really good momentum. He's probably legit, but I don't think he's this good because everything seemed to go right for him.
You want a couple other positives and negatives since we're talking Baker and we're digging deep. Positives: Falcons, Saints, Panthers. How many of those defenses do you think improve greatly this offseason to become problems for the Bucs overall next year? That's a positive. Negative: Jets, Bills, Lions, NFC West, Eagles. He's got a lot of tough opponents on his schedule for next year. That's going to be problematic for him.
Yeah, it's actually funny you mentioned that because I remember talking about Dak Prescott going into 2024. And one of the things that I thought was maybe a negative for him was that he destroyed the NFC East in 2023. I mean, unbelievable. If I had to guess, it was over 30 points per game in 6 games against the NFC East, I'm pretty sure. And the Commanders got so much better defensively. And I'd say the Giants probably got a little bit because they were horrible. They got a little bit better against quarterbacks. And the Eagles, they were super injured in 2023. They got a lot better too. So you never know. You see what happens in the offseason. But that is an interesting thing. Like Baker Mayfield did beat the crap out of his division. All right, we're going to take a break. Before we do that, though, I want to say something. I made a joke about Dan being influenced by Jacob. I was just kidding. Dan's awesome, and he does like all of his own research, and he watches a ton of tape, and he's actually fantastic at that. And he's becoming it.
And he agrees with me, so I always love Dan.
Yeah, that's true. Someone said in the chat he's becoming a great host of his own show, and he absolutely is. So I shouldn't have made a joke about Dan without him being here to clumsily support himself, and then would just leave me to make some more jokes about his clumsy support of himself and all that. But I should have done that. Anyway, we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. Two more questions for eliminated teams. What are your thoughts on Courtland Sutton? Courtland Sutton ended the year as the number 21 wide receiver per game. He was top 15 overall, but 21 per game. But in his last 10 games, just like McConkey, in his last 10 games, Courtland Sutton was the number 7 wide receiver in fantasy, and he was 10 per game in both half and full PPR. And that was with a big jump from Bo Nix. Just much better production. So we saw a great version of Sutton in the last 10 games as we saw a really good version of Bo Nix. Jamey, what are your thoughts on Courtland Sutton for 2025?
Almost, similar conversation to what we said about Terry McLaurin and potentially, the situation in Tampa Bay. I would assume they're going to be in the market for a wide receiver. And does that impact what this offense looks like? A lot of stuff that worked out well for Courtland Sutton was, Bo Nix just playing fantastic in Sean Payton's system. That's not going to change, so he's still the guy there. He'll be older. You have to worry about maybe is this the start of when he could start to see a little bit of a decline. But as long as he's the alpha still, there's so much to like about Bo Nix getting better, Sean Payton just continuing to evolve the offense. And I think you just, treat him as one of these, solid number 2 wide receivers that you get after round 5 that you'll be thrilled about to have on your fantasy team.
Dave, we're just seeing the news here that Nakobe Dean for the Eagles is out for the season. He has a torn patellar tendon in his knee, so he's going to have.
Oh, that's going to linger into next year too.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Dave, Courtland Sutton. Let me give you a fun stat about Courtland Sutton. Remember how obsessed I was with Drake London's yak, his lack of yak? Courtland Sutton might be the worst yak guy in football. I cannot believe it's 4 years in a row where he's averaged 2.6 or fewer yards after the catch per reception, which is horrible. Like Drake London was, I think, 3.5 last year, and I was like, ooh, that's kind of low. Anyway, it's an interesting note on him. But what's your take on Sutton?
How many touchdowns for Sutton this year?
8.
I thought he might have had even more than that, but just based on how the season went.
That's 18 over 2 years in Sean Payton's offense.
Yeah, it's pretty good. He had among the most end zone targets in the NFL this year.
Okay. So I guess the one thing that I'm worried about is I'm 100% sure that the Broncos are going to address their run game this offseason. And they might even potentially, they're going to look for somebody who could handle all 3 downs and can play in passing down situations for sure. That's a staple of what Sean Payton loves in his offense. And does that change the pass run ratio? I just looked it up. They were 56% pass, which is about right for Sean Payton if you include the playoff game for Denver last year. But if they get a good running back who can catch the ball out of the backfield, then they might be closer to like 53, 54%. And the running back will pick up some more targets. And does it turn Courtland Sutton into a touchdown or bust type of wide receiver? That makes me a little bit nervous. But again, this is someone who's going to get appropriately drafted, not in the top 12, probably as a top 24 wide receiver, but maybe closer to 24 than to 15, for example.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our next one. Our last topic here. It's about the Green Bay Packers, and it's Jordan Love. Does Jordan Love still have big upside? I know Heath has talked about this, and he's pretty skeptical, I think, of it. Kind of feels like he's just kind of one of those low-end number 1 quarterbacks. What do you guys think? Does Jordan Love still have big upside?
He obviously does. I mean, we saw it last season, which is why, we were seeing him get drafted. I think by the end of the draft process, I think Dave and I are probably a little different on Jordan Love. If I remember correctly, you were still very much in the Jordan Love camp, which most people were. His ADP was number 6 as the, final average draft position rankings for our site. So it was right after CJ Stroud, it was QB5. Look, the receiving core was so beat up throughout the course of the season. Dobbs missed time. Watson missed time.
They all got hurt on Sunday.
And they added, an upgrade at running back. Kudos to them. It worked out well that they moved on from Aaron Jones, thought a really good season, and, found somebody who was a superstar in Josh Jacobs. So the offense, offensive design changed, and we didn't see very 30-plus passing games for Jordan Love throughout the year. But I think he still has that in his bag. And let's be fair. He had 2 pretty significant injuries that he played through. He played through the knee injury, played through the groin injury, and we don't know how much that impacted just what they were able to do offensively. So I think when you start to get to next season, depending on the rookies and where some of the free agents end up and how the offensive coordinators, look for certain teams. Like he's going to be one of these, QB2s that you draft and hopefully get just fantastic value from. So I feel that way about him, about Stroud, hopefully still about Anthony Richardson, these guys that could still be difference makers that we've seen at times. And for Love, it was the entire second half of 2023 into the playoffs. Remember last year, a year ago, wow, look what he just did against the Cowboys, off a wild card weekend. And that led to all the optimism here. I do think that they're not – I don't expect them to address their receiving core unless it's, a day 2, day 3 pick on someone that they may just fall in love with because Watson is coming back from the ACL.
I think they have to, Jamey. I mean,
they absolutely will, but it's going to be with one of those, like a 3rd-round pick. I feel like they do it every year.
Right. It's just not their history to go out and do that. And I'm sure a lot of it will come down to the medical on Watson and when he's expected to be ready, because that'll determine how they just remember they, unless they're cutting somebody, they're tied into all these young receivers.
Mm-hmm.
So, does somebody want to go play there? Dave brought up the Devontae Adams cap casualty. Does he want to maybe go back and have a swan song and finish his career in Green Bay? And that might look a lot more attractive to Jordan Love, to have at least an experienced guy that can, maybe command targets and still win. So that's a big piece of this also. I do think there's a lot to love about him, no pun intended, but there's also the downside as we've seen this season because of the run game.
And I think the ADP was inflated last year because of how he finished last year. Remember, he had 2 amazing playoff games, and he averaged 25 fantasy points in his final 9. And then this year, even in this game on Sunday, like he had an elbow issue. Is that something that slowed him down? And just really, I wonder how much of it was just him being battered. And so there is bounce back potential for him for sure. There's going to be a whole tier of quarterback twos that you're going to take with one of your last 4 picks. And if you don't see anything from them in the first 2 weeks of the season, no big whoop, you cut them and you move on. But if you do see something from them, hello value, you're on your way to having a stud quarterback the rest of the way. It's going to open the door for interest in people drafting 2 quarterbacks next year instead of just one.
If you just look at Jordan Love's page on Pro Football Reference and compare 2023 to 2024, it's pretty similar. Completion percentage is pretty similar. Touchdown rate actually higher this year. Interception rate also higher. Too many picks this year. Yards per attempt, 8 yards per attempt this year, 7.2 yards per attempt last year. Passer rating nearly identical. My point is, it was pass attempts. That was, I think, the biggest thing. And it was interesting that the Packers played the Eagles yesterday because after their Week 10 bye, the Packers became the Eagles. If you look at Week 11 on, here are the 3 lowest pass rate teams in the NFL. Philadelphia, Baltimore, Green Bay. All of them between 43.4% and 46.1% pass rate. So they are running more times than they throw. And there are only 4 teams in the NFL in that stretch that ran the ball more than they threw the ball. And those were those 3 teams and the Colts. The Packers turned into a really good defensive team that just wanted to run and run and run. The difference between them and the Eagles, obviously, is like they do it all through Jacobs, and Love didn't run. Like Love stopped running this year. That was another problem. But his rates weren't bad. Just their offense got super boring for fantasy purposes. Hurt everyone. So if I think the answer is, does he still have big upside? Are they going to throw the freaking ball? Then he will.
Well, look, the run game got better. The defense got better. Love got injured. It also, the Love conversation certainly is relevant. It's the receiving core conversation too, because when you think about all the Jaden Reed hype and disappointment we went through this season, and Romeo Dobbs, well, he flashed clearly, 2 games with 2 touchdowns, and really was disappointing the rest of the way. Oh, Dontavian Wicks, here he comes. There's no Christian Watson, and there were certainly signs of what he could become when Watson wasn't there. Well, he didn't, become that guy either. So it's going to be, I think, some pretty good values for these guys, because if they do start to throw the ball a little bit more, again, you go back to 2023, you see what they can become.
All right, guys. Let's read a couple of emails here and get on and skedaddle. fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. You can also leave us an Apple Podcast review. You will almost certainly get your question read if you leave us a 5-star review and ask a question on Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate it. But for now, fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. This is from N. Powell. Is the difference between Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels, who has the better upgrade/downgrade at wide receiver, or in Burrow's case, just retaining T. Higgins?
It's certainly a big part of it. Yeah. I mean, Burrow was good this season without Higgins. I think that's a credit to the offense, credit to Mike Gesicki and what he was able to accomplish in those games when, Higgins was out. And so what they do there, whether it's, Eric Hall, if he's healthy, or they bring Gesicki back. I don't know exactly what his contract situation is, but
I believe he's a free agent. I'll double check.
Having at least another capable pass catcher. And look, they seemingly planned ahead by drafting Jermaine Burton. And, there's still some, optimism, I would think, internally and certainly for fantasy managers of internally in the Bengals building of Andre Yoshevas, being a bigger playmaker also. So there's pieces there that will help Joe Burrow. I think the thing is, like, if Jaden Daniels gets T. Higgins, because I'm assuming that's where this is leading to. If he gets T. Higgins and still, what he does as a runner, most rushing yards for a rookie quarterback in NFL history. That just makes him much more attractive than Joe Burrow, or not much more, but more attractive than Joe Burrow. Higher ceiling, maybe lower floor because risk of injury. But I would rather have Jaden Daniels with T. Higgins than Joe Burrow with that.
Would you rather have Jaden Daniels without T. Higgins than Joe Burrow with T. Higgins?
I would rather have Joe. I'll take Joe Burrow if his receiving core stays intact over Jaden Daniels, assuming there's no holdouts, because we could see a franchise tag on T. Higgins and then this becomes a nuisance again, or Jamar Chase doesn't get his deal and it becomes a nuisance that way. But depending on I shouldn't say that with certainty. If Jaden Daniels does not get an upgraded receiving core, then I would take Joe Burrow. If he gets
or if they draft somebody,
anything of significance, I'll take Daniels. They're very close. That's basically QB 3 and 4.
Yeah, assuming you're taking Daniels in 4-point leagues.
Easily.
That's easy.
Okay. All right. Next email is from Eric. Oh, I can get the soundboard up for that one. Eric. If Kenneth Gainwell gets signed to a team that needs a running back 1, would he break the top 25 at the position?
I'd be surprised.
It'd probably depend on what that team is. So, like Dave's scenario of the Broncos, if Kenneth Gainwell goes there, and let's say he's sharing with Audric Estime, no. If that's what their backfield looks like, no. If he goes to who needs a running back?
I don't see him being a full-timer.
The answer is
no matter where he goes.
Yeah, let's say Minnesota, and they move on from Aaron Jones. Like, that would be interesting. Raiders, if he's the guy there, probably not.
What has he done to be the guy anywhere? I don't think.
Yeah, but I mean, every player sometimes needs just an opportunity.
I guess so.
Yeah, I don't see it. I like him. I think he's talented, but I think he's best in smaller doses. He's a 1B type back.
He's a great name for a running back. I will give Kenneth Gainwell that. Well, that's it for today's show.
We have one question in the chat that's interesting. Loves Mac. Adam Lee says, "What's Loves Max upside or Drake May?"
Well, yeah, Love or Drake May was the question. Is this an upside question, an overall question?
Right now, I would draft Drake May over Jordan Love.
Yep, same. Just on the belief that the Patriots are going to add. Like, if you want a team that's going to go after T. Higgins, they've got the cap space to do it. They need a number 1 wide receiver desperately. And I believe once upon a time, Mike Vrabel was on a team that took away his number 1 wide receiver, and it might have led to his downfall. Don't know if he was on board with that.
You want to play the Vrabel game. Very, 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 very run heavy.
He had Derrick Henry. Of course he was.
Asking, do you think he just abandons that and has a more...
I think he'll use the talents that he has to the best of their abilities, and that means Drake May.
All right.
I would hope so. I mean, look, this is definitely a plus for Ramondre right now.
Ugh, I'm over him.
He might be, but it's still a plus.
And he'll be there too, because they just signed him to a big contract. I don't think he's a cap casualty.
Round 8. Yeah. Okay. Where did he go? Anybody? Do you have any idea where he went, Jamie?
In our draft, no. But round 7 plus, I would think makes sense.
Everybody, take your guess. Over under pick 90.5 for Ramondre Stevenson.
Under.
Oh man, what's 12 times 8? No, he went 94th.
Oh, all right.
I believe to Joel. Right?
Does that mean we got it right or wrong?
You said what?
Under.
I said under. I thought he'd go before 90.
Wrong. He went 94th.
I thought that meant before 98th.
Yeah, you thought he went before 90th. He went 94th.
We said 90th. I think it's 98th.
He's a 90th.
You're a liar, Jamie. You just can't accept defeat. You can't accept defeat, this guy. All right, we're out of here. We'll talk to you guys on Wednesday. We'll talk about
but Rex Ryan can.
Top 12 wide receivers for 2025 on Wednesday's show. See you later.
Defeat.